announced this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. Yeah. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so that we reach that level in 2027. Yeah. And we will maintain that for the rest of this Parliament. And let me spell that out, Mr. Speaker. That means spending £13.4 billion more on defence every year from 2027. But, Mr. Speaker, we also face enemies that are sophisticated in cyber attacks, sabotage, even assassination. And so our intelligence and security services are an increasingly vital part of protecting both us and our allies. So on top of the funding of 2.5% that I've just announced, going forward we will recognise the incredible contribution of our intelligence and security services to the defence of the nation, which means taken together we will be spending 2.6% on our defence from 2027. Yeah. But, Mr. Speaker, we must go further still. I've long argued that in the face of ongoing generational challenges, all European allies must step up and do more for our own defence. So, subject to economic and fiscal conditions and aligned with our strategic and operational needs, we will also set a clear ambition for defence spending to rise to 3% of GDP in the next Parliament. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, I want to be very clear. The nature of warfare has changed significantly. That is clear from the battlefield in Ukraine. And so we must modernise and reform our capabilities as we invest. I equally want to be very clear that, like any other investment we make, we must seek value for money. And that's why we're putting in place a new defence reform and efficiency plan, jointly led by my right honourable friends, the Chancellor and the Defence Secretary. Yeah. This investment means that the UK will strengthen its position as a leader in NATO and in the collective defence of our continent. And we should welcome that role. It is good for our national security. It is also good for the defining mission of this government to restore growth to our economy. And we should be optimistic of what it can deliver in those terms. But, Mr. Speaker, in the short term, it can only be funded through hard choices. And in this case, that means we will cut our spending on development assistance, moving from 0.5% of GNI today to 0.3% in 2027, fully funding our increased investment in defence.
Keir Starmer's so-called grand defence spending pledge has quickly crumbled under scrutiny, exposing what appears to be yet another case of political deception. Just 3 hours after making a bold announcement in the House of Commons, the Prime Minister found himself facing accusations of deliberately misleading the country about the true scale of his commitment. His claim that the UK would raise defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2027, and later to 3% in the next Parliament, was presented as a historic and decisive move. Yet, as experts quickly pointed out, the numbers simply do not add up. Instead of a solid, well-calculated financial commitment to national security, Starmer's pledge looks more like a hollow political stunt designed to impress foreign allies, particularly Donald Trump, rather than a serious plan to bolster the UK's military strength. The heart of this debacle is the fact that Starmer wildly exaggerated the real financial implications of his proposal. He confidently told EMPS that the commitment would mean an additional $13.4 billion every year for defense, a number that, according to the Institute for Fiscal Studies, ISS, is completely misleading. In reality, the increase from 2.3 to 2.5 of GDP only accounts for $6 billion extra per year, meaning Starmer's claim was inflated by $7.4 billion. This is not just an embarrassing mathematical error. It is a deliberate attempt to manipulate figures to make his announcement sound far more dramatic than it actually is. Senior research economist Ben Zaranko of the IFS exposed this political sleight of hand, highlighting how Starmer, like many politicians before him, reached for the biggest possible number to make himself look more impressive on the global stage. The implication that Starmer knowingly exaggerated his figures to impress Donald Trump is particularly humiliating, painting him as a weak leader desperate for validation from the former US president rather than a serious statesman committed to Britain's security. The dishonesty does not stop there. Starmer's government is now facing further questions over whether his planned handover of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius is being used to artificially inflate Britain's defense spending figures. The government has already come under intense criticism for its decision to hand over this strategically vital Indian Ocean territory, while merely leasing back the US-UK military base located there. The potential price tag for this surrender is estimated to be between $9 billion and $18 billion in upfront payments to Mauritius, and there are growing fears that this massive payout will be sneakily counted as part of Britain's total defense spending, despite doing nothing to actually improve the country's military capabilities. The fact that Downing Street has refused to clarify whether these payments will be included in the defense budget only adds to suspicions that Starmer's government is engaged in a cynical accounting trick, padding the numbers to make it seem like they are spending more on defense when, in reality, they are giving away British territory and weakening national security.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Aside from a few of Putin's poodles who are not in their seats in this chamber here today, we are of course united in our support for the people of Ukraine and indeed in wishing the Prime Minister well in his discussions with the President of the United States later this week.
Order, Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. During the debate on defence and security, the leader of the SNP described former UK MPs as Putin's puppets, and that they were missing from the debate. This is not true. I was present for the Prime Minister's statement, left for a comfort break and returned for the rest of the debate. In fact, I've been in this chamber now nearly 4 hours today. Funnily enough, when I returned to the chamber, Madam Deputy Speaker, the leader of the SNP or none of his MPs were actually present. The leader of the SNP has misled the House and should apologise if you can find him.
I'm grateful for the honourable member for giving notice of his point of order. However, that point of order was slightly longer than what he provided notice of, and I no doubt has also let the member know that he was speaking about him.
Misleading the House.
And the honourable member should know that it's not appropriate to be accusing other members of misleading the House. Now, as ever, it is vital that members on all sides maintain good temper and moderation in debate.
The recent exchange in Parliament over accusations of misleading statements and absenteeism during the defense and security debate has once again exposed the deep divisions and growing tensions within the House of Commons. The controversy began when the leader of the SNP accused 4 UK MPs of being Putin's puppets and claimed that they were missing from the debate. This remark, clearly intended to paint certain members as sympathetic to Russia, sparked an immediate backlash, particularly from Lee Anderson, who took to the floor to refute the claim. Anderson firmly stated that he had been present for the Prime Minister's statement, had only briefly left for a comfort break, and had returned for the remainder of the debate. He also pointed out the irony that when he returned to the chamber, neither the SNP leader nor any of his MPs were present, calling into question the credibility of the accusation. This incident highlights not only the increasingly toxic nature of parliamentary discourse, but also the weaponization of rhetoric to score political points. The term Putin's puppets is a particularly inflammatory label, one that implies disloyalty and treachery at a time when Western governments are standing firm against Russian aggression in Ukraine. By using such language, the SNP leader sought to delegitimize his opponents, suggesting that their absence from a specific portion of the debate was equivalent to being soft on Russia. However, as Anderson quickly pointed out, this claim was factually inaccurate, making it clear that the SNP leader himself had misrepresented the situation. His absence, along with that of his MPs, further weakened his argument and opened the door for accusations of hypocrisy. The Deputy Speaker, Nusrat Ghani, attempted to defuse the situation by reminding members of the need for decorum and moderation in debate. She emphasized that it is not appropriate to accuse fellow MPs of misleading the House, reinforcing the principle that parliamentary discussions should be grounded in factual discourse rather than personal attack. However, the fact that such an intervention was necessary speaks volumes about the state of political debate in the UK today. The increasing trend of MPs hurling serious allegations at each other, often without substantiating them, risks further eroding public trust in Parliament.